The first SUV turned the corner slowly, then another, and another. By the time the seventh one pulled up, the entire street outside Mama Pearl's southern kitchen had gone quiet. 7 black vehicles, lined up in a row, engines shutting off one by one. People inside the diner stopped talking. I was standing behind the counter, holding a phone I had just hung up. On the most dangerous man in Atlanta. Now, I need you to understand something about me. I am not careless. I don't act without thinking. I came to this country from Lagos, Nigeria, with nothing but a student visa, my father's advice, and a promise to myself that I would build a better life. Slowly, carefully, one step at a time. I worked too hard to lose everything over one mistake, but 3 minutes earlier, a man on the phone called me a little African girl. And in that moment, I made a decision. I hung up. I didn't know who he really was. I didn't know what he was capable of. All I knew was that I would not let anyone speak to me like that. Now 7 SUVs were parked outside my workplace. 7. One phone call, one decision, and I was about to find out exactly what that decision had cost me. This is my story. My name is Adaeze Nwosu. Most people here in Atlanta just call me Ada. It's easier for them. I used to correct people. Now I save my energy for things that matter more. I came to the United States from Lagos, Nigeria, in 2019 on a student visa. I studied business at a community college. It wasn't easy. There were days I thought I wouldn't make it through the paperwork alone. But by 2021, I was able to stay and work legally. That meant everything to me. I found a job at Mama Pearl's Southern Kitchen on 43rd Street. Breakfast and lunch shift, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. And honest work has a way of steadying you. Miss Pearl, the owner, was 73 years old, born in Alabama. Silver hair, 2 long braids, and the kind of wisdom you only get from living through hard things and not letting them break you. She used to tell me, the cure for lonely is to stay useful. So that's what I did. I stayed useful. I sent money home to my mother every month. I kept busy. I worked hard. I smiled even on the days people barely looked at me. I told myself this was temporary, that I was building something, one small step at a time. Slowly, carefully, the way my father always said. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking for love, and I certainly wasn't looking for a man like Park Joon-ho. He called on a Tuesday in March. The voice was low, precise, and musical in the particular way of someone who learned English as a second language, and mastered it the way they master everything, completely, leaving no loose edges. I need a catering order, 40 people, Thursday, 7 in the morning, full breakfast menu. I will pay double the standard rate. May I get your name? I asked. A pause, then, Park, Mr. Park, that was all. 4 minutes, professional, clean. Except for one thing I noticed, and filed away without knowing why, underneath all that precision, his voice carried something that sounded like exhaustion. Not the tired of a man who had not slept. The tired of a man who had been awake for years and had forgotten what rest felt like. I know that sound. My father carried it the last years of his life. The catering order went perfectly. 40 people in a conference room. Miss Pearl raised her eyebrows at the double rate. I told her what I knew, which was almost nothing. She looked at me over her reading glasses and said simply, "Be careful, Ada." I asked her what she meant. She said, "Stay useful," and turned back to her stove. He called again 5 more times over the next 6 weeks. Each conversation stretched a little longer than the last. He asked once if the biscuits were made with buttermilk. I told him yes. Miss Pearl's grandmother's recipe, County Fair winner, 1987. He was quiet a moment, then said, "My grandmother had a recipe everyone remembered her for, doenjang jjigae. Fermented soybean paste soup. I have not eaten it since she died." I did not know what to say, so I said, "I am sorry for your loss." "It was 11 years ago," he said. And I said, "Loss does not follow a schedule." The silence after that was different from the silences before it, fuller. Like something had shifted in the air between 2 people who were not yet in the same room. "No," he finally said, "it does not." That was the moment. If moments have addresses, if you could go back and stand in the exact place where something changed, that Tuesday afternoon was mine. He came in person for the first time 2 months later. He was tall, angular face, completely still in the way that is not peace but practice. A charcoal suit that fit him the way expensive things fit people who stopped noticing they were wearing expensive things. He was perhaps 42. And he walked into Mama Pearl's southern kitchen with the controlled energy of a man accustomed to rooms adjusting to his presence. But he sat at the counter, not a booth, the counter. That told me something important, though I could not yet name what. "You are the one," he said when I approached, "who told me loss does not follow a schedule." "Yes, I thought about it for 2 months. It is not an original thought," I said. "My mother says it." Something small and quick moved across his face, like light through water. "Your mother sounds wise." "She is terrifying," I said, "but yes. Also wise." He smiled then, small, careful, like a man who had forgotten he was allowed to. He ordered black coffee and eggs, ate slowly, looked at nothing in particular, and left a $100 tip on a $14 meal. He came back the following Thursday. And the Thursday after that. By the second month of Thursdays, I knew. He drank his coffee black, preferred his eggs soft scrambled, had grown up in Busan, moved to Seoul at 16. Arrived in America at 26, with a plan and a single suitcase. He owned several companies, said this way, several companies, with the particular vagueness of someone who understands that specific information creates specific consequences. I told him about Lagos, about the city at 5 in the morning before the heat arrives. About my father's hands, and the mango tree in our compound that my grandmother planted 30 years before I was born. He listened the way serious people listen, not waiting for his turn, actually hearing. My coworker Destiny leaned across the counter one afternoon with her theory face on. "Ada. That man is not coming here for the eggs. He tips generously," I said. "He looks at you," she said, "like you are the only solid thing in a room full of fog." It happened on his 6th Thursday visit. He arrived earlier than usual and found me on the phone with a supplier, speaking Igbo, fast, direct, the way I speak when I forget I am being observed. When I hung up, I turned and he was watching me with an expression I could not read. "What language is that?" he asked. "Igbo," I said. "My mother tongue." He nodded slowly. "Then you become someone slightly different when you speak it." "What do you mean?" "You become less careful," he said. "In English, you measure every word before you release it. In Igbo, you just speak." I felt something sharp move through me, not quite anger, something more vulnerable than anger. "In English," I said quietly, "I am always aware that I am a guest in someone else's language, that every word I choose will be used to judge whether I belong here." He was very still. Then he said, "I know that feeling." "Do you?" I said, and I heard the edge in my own voice, the part that was tired. The part that had swallowed too many small dismissals to pretend perfect patience. Because when you speak English in this country, people hear authority. When I speak English, they hear an accent and they start deciding how much of what I say they will actually believe. He did not defend himself. He did not offer a comparison. He sat with what I had said the way you sit with something true that is also uncomfortable. Finally he said, "You are right. It is not the same. I am sorry." "I am not asking for an apology," I said. "I am asking you to understand that we are not navigating the same world, even in this diner, even in this conversation." That silence was the longest one yet. Then he said something that I did not expect. "My sister told me something similar once, that my power had made me blind to the specific ways other people are made small." I argued with her then. He paused. "I would not argue now." That was the moment the wall between us developed its first crack, not because he had said something perfect, but because he had said something honest. And honesty, I have learned, is rarer than affection and worth considerably more. But outside our Thursday mornings, everything was complicated. My mother, during our Sunday calls, had grown quieter every week as I mentioned him. Careful, measured mentions. buried inside other conversation like I was hiding them even from myself. Then one Sunday she said, in Igbo, the language of complete meaning, "Adaeze, you are not in a film. Be careful whose story you walk into." And Miss Pearl, who saw everything from behind that counter and said less than she knew, had started watching our interactions with an expression that was equal parts warmth and warning. There was also the matter of my work permit. I do not think people who were born into citizenship understand what it means to live inside a document. Every choice I made, every relationship, every risk, every Thursday morning existed in the shadow of that document. I could not afford complications. I could not afford association with anything that would put my renewal at risk. And Park Joon-ho, whatever he was, however he made me feel, was a complication of considerable and possibly dangerous proportions. I knew this. I felt it clearly, and I kept showing up on Thursdays. Friday, 11:45. The diner was full and loud. I answered the ringing phone automatically, professionally. Mama Pearl's Southern Kitchen, this is Ada speaking. The voice was nothing like Junho's. Where his voice was low and precise, this one was sharp and cold. The coldness of someone who has practiced it so long they no longer remember warmth. He switched between Korean and English with deliberate carelessness, the way someone speaks to communicate that they do not consider you worth the effort of consistency. Put Park on the phone. Mr. Park is not here. This is a restaurant. I can take a message. I was not asking for a message. The voice slowed down, each word deliberately placed. I said put Park on the phone, now. Sir, Mr. Park does not receive calls at this number. I am happy to stop. A pause, long enough to be a weapon. Listen to me, very carefully. I know who Park has been meeting with on Thursday mornings. I know what he has been building, and I know about you. My hand tightened on the phone. There is nothing to know about me, I said. I am a waitress. He laughed. It was not a warm sound. You think this is a coincidence. You think a man like Park sits at a diner counter every Thursday because he enjoys the eggs. Another pause. You are part of this whether you know it or not. And that means you are a problem that needs to be managed. I am not a problem, I said, still calm, still professional. My mother's voice in my head, your voice is your dignity, Adaeze. Do not loan it to anyone's anger. You are a work permit and a uniform, the man said, slowly, each word like something being pressed into skin. You are a little African girl who has somehow gotten herself tangled up in something she cannot possibly understand. And when this comes apart, and it will come apart, you will lose everything. Your job, your permit, everything you came here and scraped and begged for, there it was. He had found the exact location of my fear and pressed it deliberately, methodically, like a man who has hurt enough people to know precisely where to press. And for 3 full seconds, I felt it. The terror of it. The years of work, the permit renewals, the money sent home, the 12-hour shifts, all of it suddenly feeling fragile and contingent and dangerously close to something that could be taken. 3 seconds, then something else moved through me, something older and quieter and considerably more powerful than fear. I thought of my grandmother. I thought of the mango tree she planted 30 years before I was born, that she never ate from, that she planted knowing she would not eat from it, planting it for me. For someone she would never meet, with a faith that was so much larger than fear that fear simply had no room. I thought of every woman in my family who had stood in a doorway with nothing but her name and her dignity and refused to be made smaller. Sir, I said, my voice was completely steady. You have mistaken me for a woman who can be frightened into cooperation. I do not know what conflict you have with Mr. Park. I do not carry messages. I do not negotiate. And I do not continue conversations with people who speak to me this way. If you hang up this phone, goodbye, I said, and I hung up. The diner was still loud, plates clinking. Conversation running. Gospel music low from Miss Pearl's old radio. Nobody had heard any of it. I stood with my hand on the phone for exactly 4 seconds. Then I walked to table 7 and refilled their orange juice and asked if they needed anything else. It was 12 minutes later when Destiny screamed. I turned toward the window. The first black SUV was already parked. The second was pulling in. I counted to 10 and stopped counting. The diner went silent the way rooms go silent before something irreversible happens. Customers froze mid-bite. Someone's coffee cup hovered halfway between the table and their mouth. Destiny stood completely still, both hands pressed flat on the counter, her eyes moving from the window to me and back to the window. The door opened. Park Joon-ho walked in. 4 men behind him, large, composed, positioned with the geometric precision of people who have done this many times in many rooms. But Junho himself was walking directly to me, and his face, for the first time since I had known him, was completely unguarded. The practiced stillness was gone. What replaced it was something raw and urgent and afraid, not of the room, of what he might find when he reached me. He stopped at the counter. "Are you hurt?" Low voice, just for me. "No," he called here. "Yes, what did he say to you?" I told him everything, every word, including the work permit, including the little African girl. I said it quietly and completely, watching his face as I spoke. What moved through him then was not simple anger. It was the expression of a man who has built walls so high and so thick for so long that he had convinced himself the walls protected other people too. And now he was standing in the evidence that they did not. That his walls had directions, and the direction they faced left the people near him completely exposed. The guilt and the fury and the shame moved through him in sequence, and underneath all of it was something that looked like a man waking up inside a life he had stopped examining. "Ada," he said. "I am not finished," I said. He closed his mouth. "I am a woman on a work permit in this country. Do you understand what that means?" "It means I cannot afford to be associated with investigations or criminal networks or federal anything. It means everything I have built here, every year, every shift, every dollar I sent home exists inside a document that can be revoked. I did not know what I was walking near." "I deserve to know." He did not look away. "Yes," he said, "you did. Then tell me the truth, not several companies, the truth, all of it." He reached into his jacket. Not a weapon, an envelope. He placed it on the counter in front of me. I did not touch it. "Everything I am about to tell you is in there," he said. "Documented, legal. You can walk away from this conversation with that envelope and protect yourself completely. Your name appears nowhere in anything. You are clean. Whatever happens to me does not touch you. Why are you telling me this first?" I said. He looked at me steadily. "Because you deserve to know you have a door before I ask you to stay in the room." He told me everything. His uncle, Park Sung-jin, had built a network across 6 American cities. Junho had arrived at 26 not to build his own life, but to extend someone else's. 15 years inside a world that moved money across borders the way rivers move water, indifferent to what it touches. But for 2 years, quietly, Junho had been building an exit. A legitimate import business. Real goods, real taxes, real employees. The Thursday morning meetings, the 40 people, the catering orders that started all of this, were lawyers, accountants, and federal liaisons. He had been cooperating, carefully, with people who could give him what money cannot purchase. A clean name. The man on the phone, his name was Choi, his uncle's enforcer, had discovered what Junho was doing. The call to the diner was a message, a warning. A way of saying, "I know your weakness." He had chosen me as the weakness because he had seen something that Junho had not yet said out loud. I sat with all of this for a long time. Then I thought about my work permit. About the very specific courage it required to sit across from this man in this diner with 10 SUVs outside and choose, knowingly, with full information, with everything to lose, what happened next. Nobody would write that choice down, nobody would call it brave, but I knew what it cost. "I am not walking out that door," I said. He exhaled, slow, careful, like a man releasing something he had been holding for years. "But Junho, if we walk forward from this table, you are going to learn Igbo, properly." He blinked. "Then, yes, I will learn Igbo, and you will call my mother on Sunday. And you will not panic when she interrogates you for 45 minutes. I will not panic. She will try to panic you. I understand. I picked up the envelope. I held it without opening it. And you will never again let me stand close to something dangerous and call it protection. He leaned forward slightly. Never again. Destiny, who had been pretending to wipe the counter 6 feet away for the past 10 minutes, muttered under her breath. Finally. And the diner, slowly, cautiously, like a room remembering how to breathe, began to fill with sound again. Choi was arrested 4 months later. When I heard, I sat in the diner after closing, just me and the low hum of the refrigerator and the smell of the day settling, and I felt something I had not expected. Not triumph. Something quieter, relief that folded into sadness for the version of Junho who had spent 15 years inside that world. Sadness that looked, after a while, like gratitude. That he had found his door, that I had been somehow part of what made him walk through it. My mother called that Sunday as always. I told her everything. 40 minutes, no omissions. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. Then she said, in Igbo, *, the mango tree in our compound was planted by your grandmother 30 years before you were born. She never ate from it. She planted it, knowing she would not eat from it. She planted it for you. I know, Mama. Then you understand, she said, that the bravest thing a woman can do is plant something she may not live to see. And the second bravest thing is to trust a man who is trying to become worth the planting. She then asked if he was handsome. I laughed so hard I cried. Junho is learning Igbo. He studies for 1 hour every morning with the focused seriousness of a man who approaches everything as though it matters. Because for him, it does. He mispronounces everything. He does not let this discourage him. He calls my mother every Sunday and has survived her interrogations with a composure that she has grudgingly admitted to me she respects. He made me doenjang jjigi last month. His grandmother's recipe, rebuilt from memory, and 3 calls with an aunt in Busan who cried when he explained why he was asking. I ate it slowly, at a table set between 2 worlds, tasting grief that had been transformed, through memory, through time, through the stubborn decision to remember into something that nourishes. I told him it was the most honest food I had ever eaten. He said, "You are the most honest person I have ever known." And I said, in Igbo, "Ani wetara oji wetara endi letter 1e5. He asked what it meant. The one who brings something true, I said, brings life. He thought about it the way he thinks about everything fully, quietly, without rushing. Then, I want to see the mango tree. In Lagos, I want to stand underneath it. And I realized, in that moment, that my grandmother had known something none of us could have predicted. That when she pressed that seed into Lagos soil 30 years ago, tired hands, faithful heart, planting for a future she would not witness, she was planting for a Thursday morning in Atlanta. For a phone call, for 10 SUVs, for a woman who would hang up and not flinch, for a man who needed someone to show him that the door he was building toward was worth walking through. Some things are planted not for the planter, but for whoever is brave enough to finally arrive. If you stayed until the end, thank you. Love does not always arrive softly. Sometimes it parks outside your window in 10 black SUVs and asks if you are hurt, and sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is pick up the phone and hang it up. Thank you for listening to this story. If it meant something to you, there's more like it here. You're always welcome to come back for more.